The Tamer is repulsive. Level 4. The Five-Clawed Paw. As I landed at the bottom of the sewer, I looked up and saw Squeak crawling down after me. I moved aside, and the Grand Master of the Verminous Assassinorium landed beside me, making a small splash as she impacted the liquids that flowed beneath our feet. I silently thanked the guy who made my clothing for bothering to put in useless passives such as auto-clean, scent eraser, contaminant immunity, and waterproof. Squeak grabbed my hand and tugged me down the winding tunnels. I could tell she intended to take me somewhere, but where would a being that never existed in this world want to take me? What are we doing? Do you have somewhere in mind? It's not like you know this area. I tried to get clarification, but Squeak merely pulled me harder as we began to go even deeper into the sewers. Finally, Squeak stopped and motioned for me to keep quiet. She bamfed out of existence, and a few moments later I heard the screams of men being cut down echoing from up ahead. After the shrieks faded, Squeak slinked out of the darkness from in front of me and motioned for me to follow her. This time, we were going far less quickly as she sauntered along, her hips popping with every step. Occasionally, she would try and sneakily look back at me through her mask made of face, only to quickly turn back to face in front of her. Finally, I had enough. The questions that were filling my head were too many to ignore, and I had to ask at least a few. Squeak, you can talk. Squeak turned around while walking backwards, seemingly knowing where her every step was falling. Her paws were held behind her back and her tail wrapped around her waist like a belt.
Of course Squeak can talk. Everyone can talk. Silly master husband. Did you think Squeak was silent mute?
Okay, stupid statement on my part. Not really. I had just never heard you speak basic before. Squeak giggled, and from behind her face mask I swore I saw a playful smile.
Master husband, Jess. Squeak is not speak, talking, and nasty, icky, basic. Squeak is speak, talking, and queakish. So is master husband.
Squeak put her index finger to her chin and continued.
Although master husband is special unique, Squeak is glad to confirm that you do speak, talk every language at once. We were worried that you maybe might not understand us. This is good omen sign.
We? Squeak laughed and turned around, her hands now on her hips and her tail reached toward my face, its tip caressing as if it were a third hand.
You'll see. Everyone has been waiting for you a great long time.
More questions filled my mind, and I decided to ask just one more. Where are we going? Squeak stopped in her tracks and took a long, thin spike made of magicite from her actual belt. She held it in front of me for a while before jamming into a crack in the wall. The sewers shuddered as the bricks in the wall began to shift in the visible traces of magic, and, before long, the wall had opened up and the bricks had faded from reality altogether.
Not going. Here.
Squeak made a come here motion with her index finger as she walked through the opening in the wall. I followed her with growing trepidation as we moved down the hallway well lit with magical lamps, a far cry from the occasional flame scone that burned in the sewers. Once we were far enough inside the hallway, the bricks moved back into place behind us as Squeak's key flew over to her. She stowed the key into a pouch on her belt and gestured for me to stop once again.
Squeak will go ahead and make sure that there are no danger threats. Stay put. And keep your mask off and hood down. It could keep you alive.
With that, Squeak bolted off down the hallway. I had been waiting here for what felt like several hours. Rather than standing, I had decided to sit and had reclined against one side of the hallway. There was a rumble, and the entryway to the sewer opened. I jumped up to my feet and prepared to defend myself and came face to face with a wall of rattan warriors. Their haphazard mix of leather and chainmail, along with their weapons being those that were likely taken from the dead bodies of their foes, led me to assume they were low level, and thus easy enough to kill. I hoped my taming abilities would help me avert potential conflict, but I was not going to risk getting killed if push came to shove. The rattan warriors entered the hallway and then noticed me. We stared each other down for what felt like 5 minutes before one of the rattan, the one that was more well-equipped than the others, pointed at me with its mouth open in shock. "Vermin King!" I hastily turned around to face the threat that they were talking about, but saw nothing there. "The Vermin King! He is here! I turned and pointed toward myself, implying that I had no idea if they were talking about me or not. The rattan warriors began to cheer in their scratchy, raspy voices as they rushed over to me. I could not sense hostility from them, and even if they attacked me all at once, they would barely be able to damage me before I beat them. Soon enough, the mass of flea and sewage-covered rat people had begun to dance around me and were obviously admiring me in my attire. It was then that Squeak returned, bamfing into the middle of the miniature party. As she appeared, the rest of the mob of rat men quickly fled away in abject fear. Squeak made a mix of hissing and squeaking noises that I could not understand before grabbing my hands and pulling me close to herself.
Squeak is sorry for that. We hoped that your reveal would have been more appropriate. But now...
Squeak rushed off to the fleeing rattan warriors, and after a while she returned.
Problem issue dealt with, but no more risk should be allowed taken.
She wrapped her arms and tail around me and pulled her face-covered face close to my neck. Then there was a feeling of falling, followed and preceded by the surroundings growing thick with black smoke. We landed and Squeak removed herself from me in a hurry. As the cloud of twisting black smoke faded, I beheld Squeak along with 4 other tall feminine rattan women. Squeak was the third tallest, 1.98 meters tall, was on the far right, followed by a rattan with steel-colored fur that was the second tallest at a little over 2.1 meters. An extremely tall pure white rattan, roughly 2.45 meters tall, with a bust of some pumpkins that were in the middle. Then a brown and black-colored one who was the shortest at 1.8 meters, and finally the last of the 5 females was a rattan with light brown fur with a height of 1.9 meters. Rather than wearing anything, the 4 others were entirely naked and giving me looks that one might attribute to a succubus. Squeak quickly removed her clothes too, and as my head and eyes moved around, I now realized that was a large room that had hastily been converted into a regal bedroom with a massive bed straight behind me. The other furniture had likely been in place, was now pushed and piled away near the walls, and my only hope of escape lay in the heavily reinforced door that was now several dozen meters away. Over in one corner, there was the remains of a portal spell, and the remnants of mana from magic circle that had fused with the walls were more than enough to clue me in on the immeasurable power needed to make such a sigil. My gaze at surroundings shifted back to the white rattan. The towering, snow-furred rattan woman shredded towards and walked around me, ravishing me of her eyes until she was once again in front of me. She grabbed my shirt and pulled me into a kiss, complete with tongue, and her tail slipped out from behind her and began to worm its way into my pants. I tried to pull back, to even move or speak at all, but my movement and speech were locked by an incredibly powerful spell. As her tail made its way into my underwear and down to my groin, she pulled her lips away from mine, and a playful yet impressed smile crossed the face of the Amazonian rattan woman. She gazed back at Squeak and the other 3 and beckoned with her finger for them to approach. The 4 smaller females quickly began to remove my clothes, layer by layer, until I was completely down to my underpants, with the tail of the white-furred rattan still coiled around my cock. The white-haired one lifted her clawed foot and quickly pulled down my underwear, eliciting gasps from the other 4 that I assumed meant that they were impressed. Even the white-fur one seemed pleasantly surprised, and I could completely understand. The created character limits are practically non-existent, and so many players gave their male and even female characters massive assets. I was no exception. I often asked myself how my character could even fit such a thing in his pants. However, seeing as how I had not noticed my massive girth before this moment, I assumed that was just part of the game that somehow bled over into the new world. I was only able to marvel at my own massive dong for a short period before the same magical force that had rendered me immobile and mute launched me backwards and onto the large bed. I was now free to move on my own, albeit barely, and I looked up only to see the 5 or 10 females approach with the intent to mate, fully plastered all over their furry faces.